Imagine you walk into a waiting room. There are chairs lined up against the wall, fluorescent lights humming overhead, a few magazines on the table that are 3 years out of date, and a little sign on the wall that says, "Your turn is coming. Just wait." So you sit down, and you wait, and you wait. You check your phone, you flip through the old magazines, you look at the clock, you wait some more. An hour passes, then 2, then 5. At some point, you stop looking at the clock because it's almost too painful. You just exist in that waiting room, comfortable enough not to leave, uncomfortable enough to feel quietly miserable. Here's the thing. Most people are living their entire financial lives in exactly that waiting room. They're not broke. They're not thriving. They're just waiting.
Here's the story most of us were handed growing up. Work hard, get a steady job, pay your bills on time, save a little when you can. Don't take big risks, be patient. And eventually, things will get better. And look, there's nothing wrong with working hard or being patient. But there's a version of that story that quietly traps people. It's the version where waiting gets confused with planning, where surviving gets mistaken for progressing, where just getting through the month starts to feel like a financial strategy. Most people in their 20s think, I'll get serious about money when I earn more. Most people in their 30s think, I'll sort all this out once things settle down. Most people in their 40s, I wish I'd started sooner. That progression isn't a coincidence. It's what the money waiting room does to you. It keeps you comfortable enough to stay, busy enough not to notice, and just hopeful enough to believe your number is almost called. The question isn't whether you're in the waiting room. The question is, do you know you're in it?
Let's break down how the waiting room actually works, because it's not obvious. The money waiting room isn't poverty. People in the waiting room often have jobs, maybe even decent ones. They might have a car, a place to live, a Netflix subscription. From the outside, things look fine. And that's exactly the problem. Psychologists have a concept called satisficing. It's a blend of satisfying and sufficing. It basically means humans don't always optimize for the best outcome. We optimize for good enough. The moment something crosses the threshold of acceptable, our brain relaxes, stops searching, and says, okay, we can stop here. The money waiting room is financial satisficing. Your income covers your bills. Good enough. You're not in a crisis. Good enough. You have a little savings somewhere. Good enough. And so the brain says, no emergency here. Move along. The urgency disappears. The motivation to act fades. And weeks turn into months, months turn into years, and the waiting room just becomes home. Think of it like this. Imagine 2 hikers at the base of a mountain. One of them is exhausted, running low on water, and hasn't eaten. Everything in their body is screaming, move, get help, find resources. They act immediately because the pain is too loud to ignore. The second hiker? They're tired, but not dangerously tired. A little hungry, but not starving. A little lost, but not panicking. And so they sit down on a rock and think, well, I'll figure it out in a minute. That second hiker is most of us financially. Not in enough pain to act, not in enough comfort to truly thrive, just sitting on the rock. Now here's where it gets interesting. The waiting room isn't random. It's actually designed, not by some shadowy conspiracy, but by a combination of systems, habits, and psychological forces that all quietly point in the same direction. Stay seated. Think about how consumer culture works. Every upgrade in your life, a newer phone, a better apartment, a nicer car, gives you a short burst of pleasure. And then your brain adjusts, and that becomes the new normal. Psychologists call this the hedonic treadmill. You work harder to buy better things, the things stop feeling special, and now you need to work even harder to feel that rush again.
The treadmill keeps spinning. The waiting room stays full. Then there's what economists call present bias. Our brains are wired to heavily prefer rewards right now over bigger rewards later. Show someone a choice between $100 today and $150 in a month, and a huge number of people take the 100 today. Logically, that makes no sense, but psychologically, it makes perfect sense. The future doesn't feel real the way the present does. So we spend now and save later, and later keeps getting pushed. And then there's the most powerful force of all, social mirroring. Humans are deeply social animals. We calibrate our behavior against the people around us. If everyone in your world is renting forever, buying new cars on financing, and not talking about investing, that becomes the invisible blueprint for what normal financial life looks like. You're not failing. You're just fitting in. And fitting in keeps you exactly where everyone else is, in the waiting room, waiting together.
Here's the deeper truth that most financial advice misses. The money waiting room isn't really about money. It's about identity. People don't avoid building wealth because they're lazy or stupid. They avoid it because the version of themselves that invests, builds assets, and thinks long-term feels like a different person. Someone else. Someone more serious. Someone with more money to begin with. Someone who had a different start. There's a story we tell ourselves about who gets to be good with money. And for a lot of people, that story doesn't include them. Not yet. Maybe someday, but not yet. This is what keeps the waiting room door revolving. Because wealth building isn't really a math problem. If it were, everyone would just do the math, see the numbers, and act. The math is easy. Compound interest, spend less than you earn, invest consistently. Most people know this. The real barrier is psychological. It's the gap between knowing and seeing yourself as someone who does. The people who escape the waiting room aren't always the ones who made the most money. They're often the ones who, at some point, just decided, this is my life, this is my money, and I am the person who handles it. Not someday, now. That identity shift changes everything. Suddenly you're not waiting for the right moment. You're creating it. You're not waiting to feel ready. You're acting before you feel ready. Because you understand that readiness doesn't come first. Action does.
So what do you actually do with this? First, recognize the waiting room when you're in it. The signs are subtle. If you catch yourself saying things like, once I get to X, I'll start doing Y, that's the waiting room talking. Once I pay off this card, once I get this promotion, once things calm down, these are waiting room sentences. Start noticing them. Second, reduce the size of the first step until it feels almost embarrassingly small. One of the reasons people stay stuck is because they imagine the solution to be enormous. I need to overhaul my finances. I need to learn everything about investing. I need a full budget. And because the task feels massive, starting feels impossible. So instead, what's one thing you could do in the next 24 hours? Open an investment account. Automate $10 a month. Read one article. The size of the step matters less than the fact that you took it. Third, change your environment. Remember social mirroring? You become the financial average of the people you spend the most time with. This doesn't mean abandoning your friends. It means deliberately adding new inputs. Books, podcasts, communities of people who talk about money differently. Let new blueprints of normal start replacing the old ones. And finally, stop waiting to feel ready. There is no version of this where you wake up one morning and feel completely prepared and motivated and certain. That morning doesn't come. The people building wealth aren't more certain than you. They're just more comfortable acting without certainty.
There's a final thing about waiting rooms that's worth understanding. The chairs are always free. Nobody's charging you to sit there. You can stay as long as you want. And because leaving requires effort, requires getting up, figuring out where the door is, walking into something unfamiliar, most people just don't. They wait. And the waiting feels like something. It feels like patience. It feels like caution.
It feels almost virtuous. But time, it turns out, is the most expensive thing you own. Every year you spend in the waiting room is a year of compound growth that doesn't happen. A year of financial identity that doesn't form. A year of your actual life, not a dress rehearsal, spent watching the clock and telling yourself your number is almost up. The door out of the waiting room isn't locked. It never was. The only question is whether you're going to keep waiting for someone to call your name or get up, walk out, and start building something on your own terms. Because here's what nobody in the waiting room tells you. Your number? It was never going to be called. You have to call it yourself.